This is my personnel interview with Caleb Pinyan, a career tech director, and he works with personnel in the Boaz City School System. I am Patricia Marlene Gregory Freeman, and I thank you, Mr. Pinyan, for granting this interview about our hiring process at Boaz City Schools.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Your first question is to just describe our interview process in the Boaz City School System, please.
All right. Most of our jobs are posted on the Teaching Alabama website. And once applicants apply for that, then whoever is doing the hiring on that, be it principals or directors, they'll go through the applications that the applicants have submitted, review resumes, and then select candidates to interview based on their qualifications. Our interview teams are usually at least 3 people. That's a new thing that has started recently, as far as just interviewing 3 or having 3 people on an interview panel. Some other positions, when I got hired as principal to high school, there was 8 or 9 people on that interview team. So that's on bigger jobs, I guess there's more people involved in it. So that's kind of the interview process. And then once the committee has selected a candidate, then they will send that over to central office, and it'll be processed from there and approved by the board, or submitted to the board for approval. And then they'll be hired after that. So that's kind of the interview process.
Okay, well, thank you. Question 2 asks, since we have 5 schools in our system, is there any differences in the way the hiring is done, other than the certifications, of course, would need to be different?
Yeah, just certifications are different at different levels. Really, the only things that are different is at the high school, middle school levels. You have coaching vacancies that you also need to fill, so that's sometimes plays a factor in who you hire in certain positions based on coaching vacancies that you have. At the elementary schools, you have specialty areas that need to be filled, aides. Those are some things that if you have paraprofessionals, they have to now pass the work keys test. If they don't have a 2-year degree or 4-year degree or a certain number of hours, there's always changing rules about how you can hire somebody and what they have to have. As far as, you can't just hire somebody just because they have a high school diploma anymore. There's a little more to it than that.
Is the 2-year degree requirement still in place for paraprofessionals?
No, you can have a certain number of college hours, or you can pass the work keys. If you score 3 in 3 of the specific areas for that, which is called bronze, then you can be hired as a parapro.
Well, that's changed since I knew that information.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Question 3 is, what specific qualities in teacher candidates do administrators and central office staff look for?
Content knowledge would be one of the biggest things. Being able to work with others, being able to submit paperwork in a timely manner is always a need for people to be successful at their jobs, and to keep there's an excessive amount of paperwork. And like in career tech, I've done more paperwork in the past 3 months than I have in probably 16 years. When I was just a teacher, an AP, and a principal, there's always paperwork has to be processed. So being able to turn that stuff in on time is a big thing for me. But at the local level, as far as like actual teachers, content knowledge, like I said, and being able to work well with others. Because if you got at the elementary levels, you've got pods at some of the schools, you've got grade levels that you have to work with. Everybody has to stay on the same pace. At the high school, middle school levels, you got specific content areas that everyone has to work, towards a common good. So being able to work well with others is quite a large factor for me.
Do you feel like, after interviewing several people in your career in your different positions, that you can get that from an interview and a resume and what they have on Teach Alabama, or do you reach out to, if they're, say, just finished student teaching, their college professors or former employees to see how they work well with children and with others? Or
Yeah,
you would
reaching
try
out
to
to,
pick that up from the interview process?
well, it's a combination of it's hard to tell that stuff from application or from a resume standpoint.
Right.
So if it's somebody who's fresh out of college, they just got their bachelor's degree, they're applying for the first job, always call their cooperating teacher that they did their internship with, and the building principal for that, to see if they had a chance to go by and see that teacher teaching us a couple of lessons or something like that, or how well that they fit into the school when they were doing their student teaching there. So yes, I would always contact for people coming straight out of college. As far as teachers coming from other systems, at this point in my career, I know a lot of administrators in the area. So if they're coming from an area school, I'll reach out to them, call the references that's on their reference sheet. And if I know someone who worked with that person, I might call and reach out to see, ask about that person as well.
Okay, thank you. Question 4 has to do with the author that's an ideologist that I spoke to you about when I saw you today, Malcolm Gladwell. And he feels like that not just in education, but in football drafts, sports drafts, and with attorneys, that the process we use for hiring doesn't really tell us the true abilities of a person in a job. He calls it the mismatch, and he says the mismatch is that the criteria we use to measure and assess teachers during certification does not match with the actual skills and attributes of effective, high-quality teachers. So he feels like you can have your content knowledge all day long and maybe pass all the praxis tests, but he even goes on to say until you actually see the person in a job, it would be hard to assess that they're actually high quality. But then I don't know how you would do the part about seeing them in a job. That's why on the previous slide, I asked you about contacting people that had seen them. So do you agree or disagree with his mismatch description? And do you think this problem does exist in education? Do we get teachers who make and pass college level tests and state level tests and get their certificate, but can't relate to students and can't do the job that they're required to do?
Absolutely. That is a problem. And it is a thing to where people can go through certificate college, prep programs and pass all the praxis tests and have the content knowledge and can do well in an interview. And then you get into a classroom and it's like a train wreck. So yeah, that is a problem. And, when I started at Athens back many years ago, this was an interview process in order to get into the teacher program. Well, I don't know that anybody ever got kicked out of it or not let in. And even as a student, listening to and just knowing the people that you're in class with, you're like, golly bum, this guy will never be successful as a teacher. And you do get a feel for stuff like that. Even as a college student, I could pick up on stuff of that nature. And sure enough, those are some of the people who've been arrested, who've not been in education for very long once they got out. And what was amazing to me is, you could pick up on people who were, just the really go-getters when we were in college. And a lot of those other people are administrators now that I still catch up with. Yes. So yeah, it is a problem. You can have all the content knowledge in the world, but if you can't describe it to a kid and to get them to buy into it or to relate to it, you're wasting everybody's time.
Right. Okay. I think I have one more question about what Mr. Gladwell had to say. Oh yes, on this one. You have children in elementary school, and I'm raising 2 of my 4 grandchildren. And we think about class size a lot. And he says that the effectiveness of a teacher is more important than smaller class sizes. And he gives even quantitative data on teacher measurement and how many people over the country feel like a smaller class size will do the trick. But if they're not a high quality teacher, they're not a high quality teacher. So do you agree or disagree with his statement regarding teacher effectiveness and class size? And would you elaborate on how your agreement or disagreement?
Yeah, I would agree that it's more of the bigger effect is how effective the teacher is versus the class size. Now, obviously, you can't, even at the elementary level, you can't get 40 kids in there. That's you get to a point of diminishing returns. But if you got somebody who's questionable as far as being able to manage kids or to relate to them or to be an effective teacher, it's not going to matter if they got 6 in there or 26. That portion, I don't think that's going to matter. I've seen classrooms that had 15 people in it, classrooms that had 35 in it, and somebody who's bad at classroom management is not going to manage the class with 15 any better than they will a class of 35. Right. And effective teachers will have just as strong a hold on a 35 person class versus a 15 person class or even a 7 person class. So yeah, I agree with that.
All right, thank you. All right, the next question asks, which areas in Boaz City schools are considered the most difficult to staff?
It's getting to where most areas are, even elementary teachers. It's becoming, you see less and less people who are applying for jobs, people who are less qualified, or for a math position that we've had open, there was only 3 or 4 people who were even qualified, who had math certificates to even teach it. Now, there are ways that you can go about getting somebody certified in other areas once they take practice classes and take some other things called provisional certificates. We're doing that with several people that we hired this summer. Our career tech those are hard to find because you try to get people to come in, and usually a high school teacher salary or just teacher salary in general is going to be less than what they can make out there in the private sector. So it's getting difficult to staff. Special ed is one of the hardest things to staff right now. Math and science teachers are hard to find. Just for an example, there's a college, I don't know which college you're doing your EDS through, but there's a college not too far from here, and their spring interns and fall interns, there is a total of 3 people who are doing their internship in math for this fall and spring semester. And that's 3 available teachers coming out within the next, they'll be finished and ready for jobs at the end of the year. And that's nowhere near what we need. I know we got the Teams contract and stuff like that for math and science teachers, but that's causing its own set of problems throughout the state. We had a career tech teacher who was a former science teacher. He left and went to another district to go teach science all day long so he could make more money. He went from a 10-month contract here to a 9-month contract there and got a raise. So wow. It's causing problems. There was a lot of teachers who left being a math or science teacher to get into career tech because most of those jobs do have 10 or 11-month contracts. Well, now then they're flowing back the other way. Now then they can have a 9-month contract and make even more than they were as a career tech teacher. So it's statewide, it's put a hurting on career tech in that area as a result from the Teams contract. But special ed, that's been tough to find teachers who are qualified to do it. That's not something you just go take a practice in. So it's getting to the point where all areas are
hard,
difficult to staff. Yeah.
I've been teaching a really long time, and I've never seen a teacher shortage like we see now. Yeah. And I am getting my EDS through Jacksonville State University. If I didn't say that before, I wanted to point out where I'm getting my degree from. But I know of interns, not necessarily from that college, that were doing their student teaching, but got hired at an elementary school because it's so hard for schools to find teachers right now.
Yeah, at JSU, out of their interns that they have right now, they've got 19 are hired out as long-term subs, 2 in secondary and 17 in elementary schools. And most of the people who are doing their alternative certificates at JSU right now are actually hired 16 out of 18 in the fall are hired, and 21 out of 29 in the spring are already hired.
Right.
So it's brutal. It's like seeing these numbers. It's brutal. It really is.
Yeah. So you might not get to pick through the pool like you used to could or would like to, because
No,
the pool's so small right now, huh?
more of a puddle.
Or the puddle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of that pool has turned into a puddle.
Yeah.
And I've been in administration for, this is my 11th year, and I went from having a math opening and having 20 or 30 actual certified people applying for it, and even another 20, 25 who don't have certifications for it applying for it, down to 5 or 6. So it's in the 11 years that I've been in administration, I've seen a tremendous shift.
Yeah. Okay. My question number 7 asks, do you see trends in hiring in the Boaz City school system? Which might be a useless question, since we don't have the opportunity to see a lot of trends. But I guess what you were talking about with people leaving to go into private sector and other jobs might be a problem. I know that where I'm at, so many people left in 1 year. We have almost a whole new staff compared to what we had 6 years ago.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens. You get especially when you have a close-knit group of people at an elementary school or even at high school. Once you have once a couple of them have been doing this for a while together, and they decide, 1 or 2 of them is going to retire, and sometimes you don't work necessarily for the job. You're working for the people that, the people and the kids that you're there with, and maybe even, you really like the administrator that you work for. And when administrators change, it always brings some uncertainty. So I'll point out one trend. I don't know who all will see all this, but like in the area within about 25 miles from here, there's this year, there's been 10 high school principals change they started the year with a different principal than they had last year. So like Boaz, Albertville, Sardis, Atala, Fort Payne, Scottsboro, Fife, Plainview, come on now, Douglas, Gunnersville still hasn't hired a principal. They only have one administrator right now, and it's their high school assistant principal that they had last year. So that's 10 schools that started a school year with a fresh new high school principal, and that's a tremendous overturn.
Yes, it is.
In high school principal jobs. That's not to even figure in all of the elementary. I know all the high school because I've been a high school administrator for 10 years. So
is that trend because there's not many people who are getting degrees in administration, you think, or because schools are looking for different types of leadership?
Some of it is you just have some attrition of central office people who retire, and then sometimes those jobs are filled by high school administrators, especially. There's a couple of those that I named off. One of those was medical. One of them retired. There's been some transfers in there. I went from being a high school principal to being a career tech director and certification director here to central office. So some of it is retirements. Some of it's just, I think that there has been a lot of moving and shaking, as we say sometimes. And then once people in one area start moving around, then it causes ripple effects.
Right.
And we've got people who, I've noticed something this year, not just here, but in other places, about people leaving mid-year like this, which is it's been more unusual now than it has been, about people leaving in mid-years and taking other jobs or just retiring out and various things.
Okay. All right. And my last question is please give your opinion on the difficulties in hiring the right staff. which may
Okay.
overlap with some of the answers to the other questions, but you've staffed or worked to staff a high school before and worked, like you said, in many principals' jobs. So what's your opinion on the difficulties?
Trying to find the right chemistry with teachers sometimes is quite a challenge. I'll give an example. At when I was assistant principal, we hired 17 new teachers one summer at the high school, and there was 2 business tech teachers that we hired during that time, and independently they were great. They were really good together. There was some friction there between the 2 of them as far as working together, and then one of them ended up leaving and went to another school, and it wasn't the right fit for them to work together. Now, independently, like the kids loved both of them. It's just they had a hard time of meshing together. And the bigger the school, sometimes, if you have 10 people in an English department or 12 people in an English department, you can get some very strong personalities, and trying to run a department meeting gets very interesting sometimes. When it comes to grade levels, when it comes to and like my experiences are all high school related, but I've when I was at Albertville, I had the math department was 10 people, science department was 10 people, and the career tech was 16 people. And to go from one meeting to another was completely different chemistry between all of them. It's very strange. And but yeah, hiring the right staff, because you can have staff members that'll just absolutely just destroy what you're trying to accomplish, and cause a lot of friction amongst the staff, and it really hurts your overall morale.
Do you feel like you can pick up on that chemistry of how it would work with a group or personalities through that interview process?
You can sometimes. You can get a feel of, this person is going to butt heads directly with another person if they're like this, what's the word, philosophically different. They might butt heads with them, but I've only had just a couple of bad hires in my career, and I've interviewed a ton of people. I would say that in 10 years, I've probably been on the interview committee for about 250 people. And not that I've hired 250 people, but that's about how many people that I have interviewed. And I didn't always get to interview. When I was assistant principal for the first 4 years, I didn't get to interview anybody. So, but as I progressed in the last 3 years, I interviewed a ton of people as an assistant principal. And as a principal, I've hired lots of people. So picking stuff out of an interview is very difficult. I can tell you one thing that I always had a hard time with this probably goes back to question 1 or 2, I guess. I have my first year as principal at Boaz, I had 2 English teachers that I had to replace. And out of the 41 applicants that I had for it, over half of them had punctuation issues in their application. And it just drove me nuts that I'm trying to hire somebody to be a grammar teacher or a literature teacher, and you can't capitalize your name, your address. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. Not just in their application, like on the resume too, and it drove me nuts. And so I narrowed it down. I went from 40 down to about 15 real quick.
Yeah.
And then you get, once you get past, whatever it is that you use to weed out people to start with, whether it's certifications, always one of the first things that I check, and you don't always count people out because they don't have certification, because those have been some really good hires as far as people who've been alternatively certified. So it's not just that, but that's one thing that you look for to start with, is who's actually certified for it, and then how that person will contribute to the school as a whole. So that goes back to hiring the right staff.
Right. Well, I certainly appreciate you spending this time with me on this assignment, and I'm very interested in learn some things about the way we hire and how it's changed through the years. So I thank you again.
You're welcome.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks.